It's the Heroic Girls Book Club. My name is John Marcotte. I'm the founder of Heroic Girls. With me, as always, is Vivian, which we don't have to push. There's Vivian over there. And we are here today to talk about Moon Girl and Devil Dinosaur. I have a copy of it right here. We do this once a month. We pick a book, we take it apart, analyze it, and tell you what we think so that you can decide if it's a book that you want to buy. So, Moon Girl and Devil Dinosaur is a book by Amy Reeder, Brandon Montclair, and Natasha Bustos is doing art. Reeder and Montclair had teamed up previously to do a book called Rocket Girl, which Vivian was actually nice enough to give me a signed sketch of Rocket Girl from Amy Reeder. And Bustos, I think this is the first time I've seen her, although I'm also thinking I may have seen her in Black Widow. I can't decide if I actually saw her draw Black Widow or if her name is Natasha, so I'm just thinking that she drew Black Widow, so I give it about a 50-50 shot. Vivian, how are you doing? Everything good down in sunny Southern California?
Everything is great down in sunny Southern California, but I will say you mentioning that autograph did make me miss Comic-Con very much.
Yeah. They wanted me to do a panel this year for Comic-Con. They asked me a couple times, and they're doing this smaller one in November. And I'm just like, still kind of COVID-y and, super spreader events. And, there's probably a limited well of great panel ideas I have, and do I want to use one of them up on this con that's going to be not very well attended? So I was like, I guess I'm going to pass this time.
Yeah, this is the Thanksgiving con, right?
Yeah, something like that. They have a name for it, and I can't remember what they have some clever name that's not Thanksgiving based, but yeah, they're doing it right around Thanksgiving, and which traditionally I think is WonderCon time.
April.
So April,
Yeah,
something like that. So
it's usually Easter weekend.
yeah, that's it. It's Easter. I knew it was on a holiday. I forgot it's Easter. That's right. So I want to talk about this book here, and this is the first book that I've had mixed feelings about, I think. Every other book we've had, I've just been 100% love everything about it. We're picking usually from books that are on these best of lists and things like that. And Moon Girl and Devil Dinosaur, I'm of a split mind, but we will talk about why. So do you want to try to sum up the plot of Moon Girl and Devil Dinosaur?
I would, but one of the things that gave me mixed feelings about this book was I feel like I didn't really understand it until maybe the last 3 pages, where a big motivation was suddenly revealed in kind of a small little exposition box. And
Yeah.
I was like, oh, there's a consequence. John,
You'll take a stab. All right.
have at it for the summary.
Phew. All right. This book is primarily your main protagonist is Moon Girl, also known as Lunella Lafayette. She is a very smart 9-year-old girl. In later issues, you actually find out that she is the smartest person in the world. They give her a banner design test, and she's smarter than Reed Richards. She's smarter than Dr. Doom, smarter than Tony Stark. She is the smartest person in the world by that measure.
In the Marvel Universe.
In the Marvel Universe.
Populated by geniuses.
Yep. And that actually brings her in conflict with Dr. Doom at one point, who's just, got a chip on his shoulder about he's the smartest person. So he comes to fight a 9-year-old girl, which is classy. Dr. Doom at least should be a classy villain, and I think that was a little beneath him. She's the smartest person in the world. She's going to a regular grade school. She is trying her best to get into, Oxford or Yale. She has all these rejection letters. We are never explained why, because she's obviously smart enough to be doing that. But she goes to a regular school. She has regular parents, and she has found out that she has the INHUMAN gene. Now here's where the nerd unpacking starts. In the Marvel Universe, a long, long time ago, there were these creatures called Celestials, giant godlike beings. They came to Earth and they experimented on us and humans, and they created 3 offshoots of humans. They created the Eternals, which, hey, movie's coming out, little Disney synergy right there. The Eternals, which is this long-lived race that was supposed to protect normal humanity. They accidentally created the deviants, who are like bad guys that change all the time, and they are attacking humanity. And they implanted the genetics inside of human beings to mutate at some point in the future, and that's where mutants came from. All right, sometime after that, the Kree, the people who were Captain Marvel's, that's where Captain Marvel came from, that alien race. They found Earth and saw that the Celestials had messed with us, so they decided to mess with us too. They came in and tinkered with our DNA, and they managed to create the INHUMANs, which is basically it's like a mutant. You turn on, you have powers, but that only happens when you are exposed to the Terrigen mists. This was a pure Jack Kirby creation. It was very fun. Campy, fun. So it was a ceremony. You would go in there and they would, crush Terrigen crystals, and mist would come in, and then you'd pop out and you could, shoot lasers out of your ears or whatever the thing was that you could do. And that was a big deal. A little while ago in the Marvel Universe, they actually had the Inhumans decided to increase their number exponentially by releasing this giant cloud of Terrigen mist that just wandered around the planet, changing people at random. That's where Miss Marvel got her powers from. She was a Inhuman. So, all right.
Okay,
that's all the backstory for there. That is not in the book and probably confused the crud out of people.
Yes. So yes. I want to address Chris Adcock's a message that I just saw popping up down here. That was not a last minute reveal. That was something I think that was sort of expected to be known for the first, for the duration of the book, because it's discussed in a very casual way where, I felt like, oh, am I supposed to already know what this is? And then all the way at the end, they're like, well, if, and then basically kind of crammed everything John just explained into, a couple of little exposition boxes. And I was like,
we get very early on, that she is afraid that she is going to turn into an Inhuman, but it's never explained what it is. In the Marvel Universe at that point, it had become a giant plot point because there was this giant cloud going around changing people. But this is such a book that I think should have been disconnected a little bit from the Marvel reality, and especially, even if it's not fully disconnected, they should not have expected their readers to know all this stuff, because this is a book that is just a prime opportunity to bring new people into reading comic books, into the Marvel Universe, and I think there were some missed opportunities to do that, and this is one of them. Expecting people to have this encyclopedic nerd knowledge.
No, don't do that.
Yeah, yes. Expecting you to have this nerdy knowledge about what an Inhuman is and stuff, which is a huge driving force for her the entire time of the book. She is desperate to find a way to cure herself of the Inhuman genes. I think that was a mistake. But let's start with positive stuff, and so let's start with art. And as always, since you are good at it, and I'm not, I thought I would see what you thought of the art in the book.
I loved the art in the book. I think it was so cute. First of all, the character designs were great throughout. I think, when the Hulk showed up, it was really cool to see the Hulk having been taken through the filter for the world that, Natasha had designed. And Natasha Bustos is the artist for this. Yeah. And, I love how this is really cinematic, right? You can tell her her forward momentum of her running towards the camera, towards the viewer, and then losing her balance. And the whole time we've got over here the honk, all the different types of honking, many different cars, right? So you get this sense over here on the right-hand side. So on the one hand, it's incredibly cinematic, but she never forgets the medium, and she never gets the power, loses out on the power of integrating the written word. And, even having the tap, tap, tap in the black as the same color as, as a silhouette. But then when the unusual thing happens, sprung, like her roller skates popping out, you get the pop of color. So there's so many things in here that I think are so strong.
The paneling's great. She does a good job of just breaking the page up and guiding your eye through it. She's not using standard left to right. She's going up and down, then up here. And to be able to create a page with those kind of panels and not get people lost where they don't know where they're supposed to look at next is a skill, and she's obviously very good at it. It's funny, that is the exact page that I had picked out and wrote down, great job depicting action. I always know what the characters were doing and which way they were moving, etc. because there are artists that are technically very good at drawing like pinups, for comics and things, but it's basically like they have mannequins. They're little models. They don't look like they're moving. Her characters always look like they're moving.
And everything has like, and her hair expresses so much. Her clothes express so much motion. And I like, this is another one, I think probably, again, it's another big movement panel where she's on her roller skates again, but her coming to the viewer and then leaving out into the dark night and then having and I'm pointing at my screen again with my pen, but like, if you see that the skyline of the buildings arching down to sort of push her forward, and then even the panels, the shape of the panels starting to change and arc with her momentum, and then pushing her out down the street alone, this like tiny little figure going off all by herself. It's so powerful. She's huge in the frame, the camera's low, she's moving, it's exciting, and then she's like whoosh, like down the street. So cool. Great color, I love it.
I mean, this was probably taken from a somewhat bare-bones script. You never know what a comic book script looks like, because some writers will detail every last thing they want. I want 3 triangular panels like this. And others will say, she comes up, skates onto the scene, says this, and skates out. And then it's up to the artist to figure out how to depict that. I don't know what scripts look like here. But the other thing, you mentioned something important, I think, which is how her hair is expressive. And this is one of the great strengths of the book, it's the representation. You can ask people, name a black female superhero, and they will immediately go Storm. And then you say, okay, name a second one, and they're lost. They're
Wasp.
What's that?
I said Wasp, and you said Lost.
No. And name another black female superhero. That's the thing. There isn't, comic books in general were created, the 2 big universes, DC and Marvel, were created in the 40s and the 60s. And that was at a time when they were first created, when diversity wasn't really a thing. It wasn't expressed that way. So at their core, they're very white, which we've seen in the Avengers and stuff, and we're just now starting to see them come out of that. All their great old heroes are white. So we need fresh blood injected into the Marvel Universe. I want that universe to reflect the world that I see around me. I don't want it to reflect some guy in the late 50s idea of what people wanted to see. So I think Bustos did a great job in depicting black characters, because I've seen that done really poorly before. And there are some artists that they've only drawn white people, and they get to black people and they can't do it. And
can't stick that landing. So Nachata Bustos is, she's born in Spain, but she's actually Afro-Brazilian and Chilean. So cool. It's a really interesting background, especially drawing for New York, which, I'm sure everyone has their own, like, wow, New York. Like, Bustos has lived, I think, her entire life in Spain. She went to college in Granada. But a friend of mine, Rhonda, was helping me read some interviews with her, because most of her interviews are in Spanish. And Bustos is the only person of color that she knows of who works professionally in comics in Spain, and the only person of color in the town that she lives in. So I really felt like, for someone to be drawing a comic about someone having the feeling of an outsider. Yeah. Spot on. They probably really connect in that way.
I had one other comment for the art, and that was Amy Reeder, who's one of the writers on the book, is actually an artist. That's the person who you got a sketch read from. She's Eisner nominated. Emmys are tonight, but Eisner nominated for her work on Madame Xanadu for DC, and she did the covers for all of the books. So this fantastic cover right here was drawn by her. Yeah, there it is. And she did, so all the covers, at least in this stack that we have here, are Amy Reeder art. She's fantastic. I may even like her a little bit more than I like Bustos. I don't know if the issue was she had too much on her plate, so she needed to offload interior duties. Maybe at this level of detail, you couldn't do a monthly book because it would take too long, but her covers are certainly very pretty too, and well worth taking a look at separately.
This one was my favorite.
Which one's that?
How does this work? My favorite.
The cover, I see. Oh, yeah.
My favorite Amy Reeder drawing.
Yeah.
in this book. I
I love
love these
of
kids.
the upward curve of the two puffs on the top of her head. That's just awesome.
Yeah, and just like these some like these drawings too, like her drawings in the book do express like kind of a youthfulness, I think, that
Yeah,
maybe sometimes the background characters in her school kind of start to get a little adulty sometimes, and
yeah.
all of Amy Reeder's drawings, like they look very young and
That was the reader's art was really the draw for Rocket Girl for me. I love her art. I think she's just absolutely wonderful. And yeah, and Rocket Girl again. The girl was I think 14 or 15 years old. She had traveled back from. It was like the Terminator plot. She came from the future to save us or something like that. And again, the plot was a little hard to follow, so I'm not sure. She had worked with Brandon, what's his name, Montclair, on that book. So, all right, so let's move a little bit over into like story and plot areas. And there are things that I love in this, and there are things that I think are missed opportunities.
yeah.
Conceptually, this book is so strong. The idea of pairing together this little girl genius with a incredibly strong, intelligent, bright red Tyrannosaurus Rex is that just works for me on so many levels. I love it, and I do think that the diversity element is actually really important and speaks to today. I love that too, and it's just that whole like brains and brawn combination. I think, oh man, that's just perfect. The character design's stellar all the way through the book, and you know
Yeah.
whether that came from the writer or the artist, I'm not sure, but I love that. And a couple of my and then we have this book that is a way to try to get girls invested in STEM and in
Yeah.
STEM technology. This is at her heart, Lunella is a scientist. That's that's her superpower is her intelligence, and she loves science and inventing things. And that messaging getting out there for girls is so important because there's a lot of messaging out there that tell girls that science isn't for them. And this is a complete counter example to that.
Yeah, I think that's also great for boys as well. You
Yeah,
know,
yeah,
get used to seeing these people among you, get used to respecting people who look different from you as protagonists and as,
yeah.
you know,
That's
colleagues later down the road.
that's what I always say is that the two purposes of stories. One is to give you someone to emulate as a role model to say I could be just like that person, and the other one is to get a better understanding of people who are not like you. And you
Yeah.
know that both are important, and one book can serve both purposes for different audiences. So. Oh, we have a comment from Lyle who is saying she might grow into a popular cartoon character soon, and this is absolutely true. Vivian, you want to talk a little bit about the cartoon? You know
Yes.
anything more than I do?
Okay. First of all, I work for the Disney Corporation, but in my role here as John's co-host, this is my personal opinions only. So yes, Disney Plus will be coming out with a Moon Girl and Devil Dinosaur cartoon very soon. I think it's premiering in 22.
Yeah,
So
I've seen key art from it already, and it looks great. And
I saw a job posting for it, and I was like,
that would be good. And it's Lawrence Fishburne is producing it. He saw the book, found it at some point, really loved it, and he is the one that's like behind this, pushing it, which I think is fantastic.
yes.
So
And
yeah,
he also has
oh,
a really good producing background, I think, as far as representation goes. And I
yeah,
think his first foray into animation, and I might be wrong, was in Osmosis Jones,
okay,
where he voiced the main villain. And I think I've seen him talk about that before and have heard anecdotally that was something that was weirdly important to him, was
yeah.
this kind of like introduction to the world of animation via Osmosis Jones.
Yeah,
So
yeah. Boy, I'd completely forgotten that movie existed, but yeah, I remember that now. Yeah, so Lawrence Fishburne, and of course, he's already set up at House of Mouse with Blackish, and that which I saw them filming that when I went down to campus one time. I was very
oh,
excited. I feel like such a star. So I wanted to let's talk a little bit more about the strengths of it, and then it's been a massive hit when we've given this book to kids in our reading programs. Heroic Girls have programs where we go out into the schools, give kids graphic novels, get them interested in reading. We try to make sure that we're really hitting diversity for the reasons we just outlined in order to give girls and people of color role models. They can see themselves on the page, and also to give the white kids something to say, hey, there are people like you. You're not always the hero of the story. Sometimes you need to have some empathy and put yourself in other people's shoes. So Melissa's telling us the cartoon's slotted for February, and I believe her because she knows all sorts of things. So that's the things I love about the plot and the storyline. The things I didn't love as much were I just felt it was a little confusing and the pacing was a little off, and I think there were a lot of missed opportunities to punch some themes that could have hit really hard and did not. We mentioned briefly, you remember when I gave that giant nerd speech at the top there where I was talking about all the different things that, the Inhumans, the Celestials and stuff like that? As we mentioned, you get none of that. So they expect you to know that coming in the book. And I tried to put myself in the shoes of someone who did not have that backstory. And I went, you're probably really confused. Why is she doing all this stuff? What is an Inhuman? Why would she turn into one? There was none of that was given. They expected you to have read like 10 other Marvel books to understand all that stuff. And I felt like that's going to lose people. And I don't think that you're quite the Marvel nerd that I am, at least in that aspect. Oh. So how did that strike you when she's afraid of becoming an Inhuman? Did you have any idea what we were talking about?
I had an idea that it must mean something to do with a mutant. Like maybe she'll turn into some kind of mutant. And like I've always followed more DC for the comics, Marvel for the movies. So I always really felt like, as long as I avoid the comics, I'll be surprised when the movies come out and also not get disappointed and have expectations and stuff like that. So especially, I think for me, the most confusing thing was the idea of a cloud or a mist, because cloud means so many different things these days. Like is the internet coming for her? And so it was pretty far into the book before they actually introduced the cloud as a concept, and you see it on screen. I was like, it's like a fog, like a weather pattern that's rolling in. And
it was very specific to that moment in Marvel, and really I can tell you why it happened. I'll tell you why she's not a mutant and why like Miss Marvel is also not a mutant. She's an Inhuman, and that's because at the time Marvel was still fighting with 20th Century Fox trying to get the rights to the X-Men movies back. And it was killing them. That the X-Men are their biggest property. They're by far the biggest, Spider-Man is. But as far as like great writing and stuff, through the 70s, 80s, and early 90s, the X-Men were the biggest book on the planet. And the fact that 20th Century Fox owned the movie rights to them was killing Marvel. So they didn't want to give them any help. So they actually canceled the Fantastic Four for a while, which was another one they owned. And new heroes, instead of being mutants, started becoming Inhumans because they owned the Inhumans, and so they didn't want to give Sony more great heroes that they could use and turn into movies. So that was, I think, why we were in an Inhuman world. But yeah, it just expected you to have too much outside knowledge, I think. And since this is a book that I think is a great opportunity for Marvel to bring in new readers, man, they needed a page of exposition or something on the news in the background or stuff peppered on all the way through. Some way to explain that.
Yeah, there's actually a perfect example of this in the book. And if they just took these 2 pages and put them at the top, I would have fully understood the threat. A fog will come. If you have a certain gene, you'll turn into an egg, right? Yeah. And that's the scene where the 2 women are walking down the street. They're having their own time, and they're like, it's that thing that we know about because of it's an ongoing thing in our world. Right. They know to cover their faces. It overtakes them. One of them becomes an egg. And I would be like, aha, that's really scary. Right. No wonder a child would fear this, instead of kind of wondering conceptually through the book, like, what is it precisely it is that she fears? Yeah.
Well, you become an egg, and then a little bit later you hatch out of the egg, and that's when you have your, like, powers or whatever.
I read ahead, and I was like, the next volume, and I was like, she's the same.
Well, they get to what her power is. It only activates in certain circumstances, but we don't want to give too much away on that. Okay. But Miss Marvel, it was less than a day, and for Lunella, it was actually 3 days or so, because Miss Marvel went to a party she wasn't supposed to go to, was walking home, it hit her, and then she turned into the superhero that we know. So that's basically the plot. It's her big driving force. And I have so many questions about this. Yes. Why does she not want to be an Inhuman so bad? It's it gives you superpowers. It's actually usually not such a bad thing to become one. She's actually a scientist, a woman of science, a little girl of science, if you want to say. Mm-hmm. And I always thought, those are the kind of people that generally don't carry around, like, if we're, using X-Men metaphors, the kind of bigotry and stuff that the mutants would face and stuff. I don't think she would think bad things about people. So I wanted to have a reason why she didn't want to become an Inhuman. I came up with one. This is I was sitting there. I was going, I have one, but
what's your version? I'll tell you mine.
My version is she is already a girl that is isolated from everyone by being smarter than everyone around her. She does not connect with her parents. She has no friends at school. She's smarter than her teachers who are tired of her. Her only friend ends up being a big red dinosaur that can't talk because they get along. She can do all the talking and he's never correcting her. So she already feels that alienated from everybody around her. Having one more step of being removed from humanity, one more thing that makes her different, is not something that she wants, because she wants an emotional connection with people and she's not able to get it. So that was, I wish that element had been in this book. It would have fixed a lot of things for me, because her relationships, especially with grown-ups in this book, is just weird. It is so weird.
It's pretty abysmal. And I think it reminded me of something that you told me. And this was years and years ago. This was when your daughters were still quite young, instead of in high school. But that you didn't want them to watch Disney Channel shows because of the relationship that the young characters have with adults, meaning that the young people are always smarter than every adult around them. And they do a lot of mouthing off. Yeah. And that was really the vibe that I got from this comic. Again, like, please don't fire me. But was that, there was no turn, there was no learning. She really never got past any kind of block that she had with anybody in like a constructive way. Right. And so the what I was kind of taking from her fear of becoming Inhuman was like almost that it was more of a metaphorical growing up. Right. And that she's sort of right now failing at being a kid. And if she changes further, then she really won't ever be a kid. Right. And there's a couple of reasons why this doesn't make sense. Obviously, A, it's not in the text of the book, but like, B, I think that there's a lot of, and this is obviously early days of a book that's going to go on and be successful, it
has gone on quite a bit. So, yeah,
right. I think it just concluded in like 2018. Yeah. So I think it's a great metaphor for like puberty, right? That you don't know what's going to happen to you. Right. Your body can scare you. Right. Let me read this really quickly. Powers can vary widely. Not everyone is an awesome superhero type. I agree with your assessment, but as a book aimed more for kids, needed to be more text and less subtext. Right. Yeah. So this is true. I think the trouble with this though is that there's a lot of, in the writing, I think there's a lot of sort of wishy-washiness in why Lunetta reacts the way that she does to things. And I think it's not ever something that kids are going to catch up on, or like going to catch up and be like, hey, that doesn't make sense. But I don't think you can it's not enough to just say like, kids aren't going to notice it, or this is just for kids, so you don't have to write, with clarity and thoroughly. This is a really good example of it right here, where she has a very long conversation. It's like she has, 3 pages worth of interactions with first the Hulk and then B, a person who's a fellow scientist. And
that's the Hulk. It's the same guy.
Well, I know. But like she talks to him as the Hulk and then she talks to him as like his Amadeus.
I gotcha. Sure.
Right. And then, where it's probably more of a normal interaction. Yes. Even though he's still shirtless and in his like funky shorts. But she doesn't really communicate with him. Anything that he's saying to her, she does not respond back as though they're having like a dialogue back and forth. And this happens multiple times in the book where they, her parents are saying something and she's saying it's something entirely different. And she says, you don't understand me. You're not listening. Right. She's also not listening. And so that was something I thought like this was going to be a theme that, as smart as she is, she's so young. This conversation never has like a healthy back and forth. Right. And I thought that was going to be addressed and it really never was.
No. I wanted the parents to be right about a couple things. And this is not from, I just, again, reflecting the world around me. Kids think they're smart, but sometimes they lack the emotional intelligence or social intelligence or other types of intelligence. Yes, she's smarter than everybody else in chemistry and physics and science. We'll give her that. But she's only 9. Knowing the right thing to do in every situation, the only way to get that is from experience. And that's something where her parents could help her. And that is something you see in a book like Miss Marvel, where her parents are a great source of strength. Or early Spider-Man, where he took the lessons of Uncle Ben and Aunt May really to heart, and he brought them with him, and that guided him when he was in his teenage years on how to be a good person. Could have used some of that here. It just, and how many times did her parents yell at her and tell her she's grounded, and just like nothing happened? She just went out the next day. Went out of the house, got her dinosaur friend, and was storming across New York in a day. There was never a consequence from any of that.
And I think also, so this was kind of what I was mentioning before with the sort of not really being able to settle on an angle, just from the writing perspective, not from her as a character, but she has this unconditionally loving family. Right. They give her so much love and attention, and it seems to me that they would love her unconditionally no matter what happened to her post change, right? And they're aware of it. They seem to have come to terms with it, and she hasn't. So that was something else that I was looking for, was how does she come to terms with the fact that will probably inevitably have to go through a change, right? Here's this loving, supportive family, and that never really came into play. So her fear of change versus her strong foundation at home was kind of maybe they weren't respecting the level of fear she was feeling. Right. I would have loved to have seen something where they had to acknowledge how frightened she was about what she was going through, but they kind of just blow past it with an argument where nobody really says anything very clearly.
I also felt there was a lack of acknowledgement of how intelligent she really was from the parents and from the teachers and everybody else. I mean, she's applying for all these schools and getting rejected, again, for reasons not explained, because she's obviously smart enough to go there.
Yes.
If you have this genius child that is feeling uninspired and unchallenged at school to the nth degree, you don't tell her. I mean, they kept encouraging her, just go in and fit in. I felt like they were telling her to be less than who she was. And that's just such not a good parent thing to do. They were good parents in other aspects of the book, but their message of just, go in and pretend that you are learning something at school. I mean, that was it. They would ask her what she learned, and she would say, nothing. I didn't learn anything, because she knows all that stuff already. And her pretending for a while that she was learning something and trying to mimic that, that's what her parents seemed to want. And I was like, that doesn't feel authentic to a parent to me. A parent really wants you to be the best version of yourself and to encourage you. And I don't know, it struck me as an off note. And
it's a little bit strange, because she also, you kind of mentioned this earlier, that she has maybe there's a part of her that does want to fit in and have friends. She brings it up a couple of times where everyone at school is lame. I can't wait until the next step of her life, right? Where she'll be with her peers. But when she is confronted with her peers, she is very unkind and very rude to them, right? She doesn't try to engage her teachers in any kind of a situation and then get shot down. She's just, again, it does kind of feel like we sort of walk into the story that's already ongoing, which is nice. But she has this disinterest in being normal, and then she has this seem to desire to fit in, right? So I think that's a really great grounding for a young character who's like this. But then it kind of starts getting really unbalanced, because she identifies herself by her intelligence, but then she criticizes the Hulk for saying I'm not just a smart person. I'm more than that.
The smartest person in the world. This was a plot point in the Hulk book for a while. So I think at Marvel they actually somewhere have a list where they've listed how smart people are, so they can see who can outsmart the other person in inventing or whatever. Doctor Doom, Mr. Fantastic, all those. They have a order of things, and so that has actually filtered in a meta sense into the comic universe, where the characters are aware of where they are in that ranking. That they know how smart they are compared to everyone else.
And this is something else here. Sorry, I sent this to producer Patty earlier, because this was something that it really grinds my gears visually. Please take a look at these girls from school. Mini skirts, bare midriff, leg showing makeup in the bathroom, matches, jewelry, and you put that up against Lunella, and one of them is supposed to be coded as protagonist and the other one is coded as antagonist. And I really have a pet peeve of the way that somebody is dressed expresses everything about their insides.
Right.
And that there's something inherently wrong with these girls because of the way that they're dressed.
Right.
And this is just something that kind of like it always pops out at me when this happens, where you get like trio of hot mean girls.
Yeah. Did we not settle this in The Mask? I mean, that was the whole point of The Mask, was that the hot girl was actually nice. The nerdy girl that was pining on the side was actually a horrible, horrible human being. And the insides don't always match the outsides, or sometimes they do. We just expect that they won't. I don't know how to frame that exactly.
And this is kind of like, this happens so many times though, where it's like, oh, here's an opportunity for learn, change, narrative turn, call back to something else, and it just kind of doesn't. All it just shows is that everyone around her is horrible. Yeah. So there's these girls at school, her classmates who bully her, the police who shoot at her because they're shooting at the dinosaur, but they're shooting at her too. Her parents who don't listen to her, the Hulk who talks over her and is, doesn't treat her with respect, and and then the cavemen who are the villains. But
the killer folk. We should mention, though, that this book is a spiritual and physical successor to Moon Boy and Devil Dinosaur, which was a series that the great Jack Kirby created in the 70s. By the time he hit the 70s, Marvel just do whatever you want. And he was sitting there going, oh, INHUMANs.
Moon Boys.
Moon Boys. And there were so many crazy ideas. Then he went over to DC and he's like, the new gods. And he was just... It was probably Kirby's most inventive and creative period in comics. He created so many weird, fantastic characters. I loved the killer folk, and as they adapted to modern human society by mugging people and stealing their clothes. Yes. They came up with a visual language. This was a character design that I loved, especially as they started putting on clothing and stuff. And we just talked about how clothing shouldn't match everything on the inside, but for these guys, it kind of does.
This is like expressive narratively, right? Because you can look at what they're wearing and you know where they've been. Yeah. And then you see them attack people. And I love that the one female, the purse, Ratchet has the purse on her head, and it's like, why wouldn't you put a purse on your head? Yeah,
they weren't sure quite what it was. They don't have clothing where they came from, and so she found the purse and uses it looks like an oversized helmet. Very Jamie Hernandez, the guy that did the Gorillas and Tank Girl.
For sure.
Has that kind of vibe to it. Maybe not quite as much detail, but same area.
Yeah, this is a genuinely funny book, and the killer folk are super funny. A lot of the interactions Lunetta has with the dinosaur is hilarious. Yeah. She's an engineer, she's an inventor. And usually when things go wrong, it's because she's uncoordinated. Yes. She drops stuff. She and like kind of the Butterfingers moments, like those are so funny as a fellow Butterfingers. I really identified with that.
I liked early on how she becomes not scared of Devil Dinosaur. This is like the first time they've met, to the point that when the Kree Omniwave generator, talking about stuff that needed more explanation, but when that gets lost and one of the killer ones gets it, she starts calling him a big dummy, and it was a great expressive moment for her and everything, and I loved it. I just thought it was really, you lost it, you big dummy, and he's sitting there looking kind of ashamed, as much as a Tyrannosaurus Rex can look ashamed he was doing it.
With flaming eyes.
Flaming eyes, yeah, it was the Kree Omniwave generator. I brought it up, I'm going to bring it up again. Even I was like, what the hell is a Kree Omniwave generator? Has it ever shown up before? I don't know. Why does she want it? What is it? What good is it?
It's a great MacGuffin.
But yeah, it's a great MacGuffin. I could have used this much explaining if we had seen the Kree tinkering with our DNA all the way back, and they were using the Kree Omniwave generator. Then you go, oh, that's the thing that changed our genes. Maybe she hopes it'll change it back. But yeah. It just happened to be like 2 blocks from her house in a trash heap, by the way. But
and she just found it with like a thing, and it seems like it might be super important, but it was just kind of on the ground. Yeah. This is another one of those moments that I wish we had a little bit more time with. So we've been talking a lot about her parents. This is the first time her mother was present when she whips out all of her gadgets.
Yeah.
And she saves her mom
Right.
in a really cool kind of series of like, she knows just what to do. Bam, bam, bam. And she takes care of all this stuff really fast. And not too long before that, she's sort of mouthing off at her mom, and her mom walks her to school
Right.
because there's dangerous things going on. The
Yeah.
dinosaur, the roving killer folk.
Yeah.
And
That's their street gang name by this point. By the way, they've become a street gang.
And Lunetta says to her mom, "What are you going to do about it?" And her mom never gets a chance to respond. We go further on to the scene. And then later, her mom gets to see what Lunetta's going to do about it.
Right.
And I was like waiting for that moment of her mother to acknowledge that she has use and worth and intelligence. Right. And her mom yells at her again. And I was just like, come on, like, give us I needed the payoff there.
That's the problem, is that Lunella's great, Devil Dinosaur is great, the Killer Folk are great. Most of the other characters, adult and kid, are cardboard cutouts of characters that are just propped into different scenes. They just don't have that dimensionality. They're there to achieve one function. The parents are there to disapprove and want her to stay home and want her to fit in, and there's no arc for them. They never move off of that one note. No matter what the situation is, they're still stuck there. And her, I can't imagine what a teacher would feel faced with something like Lunella. But again, much like parents, I don't think most teachers are going to be upset that they have a freaking super genius in there. Instead of being upset that she's not paying attention because she knows it, they would be pushing to get her into some advanced program or something like that. There's just no one is on her side. And I know that's a trope in a lot of heroic fiction, but I mean, this has taken it to such an extreme place that it felt a little inauthentic to me. So I would like her to have...
I mean, her science teacher in particular calls her name. She calls her Little Miss Know-It-All in front of the whole class, which I'm like, oh, pearl clutching. Like, you're encouraging name calling in your class. And then later she starts the fire, burns the school down, and then lets Lunella take the heat for it. Take the heat.
Oh, that wasn't her. I went and reread that. Those were the mean girls that were in the bathroom, were lighting matches and throwing them in the trash can, and one of them was still smoldering, and it caught the toilet paper. And so I thought the exact same thing. I thought the teacher had blown up something because they were showing the teacher with a Bunsen burner right before they show the building on fire.
Confusing.
It was not well. It wasn't well thought out in how to follow that through the story.
I totally missed that.
Yeah.
Producer Patty, could you pull up that image again of the lab? Because that fire, which we're discussing, causes, through a series of events, the destruction of Lunella's secret lab, which, it's her bat cave that she's built under the school. And so one of the things that she blames the Hulk and the Devil Dinosaur for is destroying her lab, which she spent so much time on.
Right.
And this was another missed opportunity. That's definitely like a dark night of the soul moment where it's like everything that you've been working for, that's where the technology is that she uses to track the...
Hold on 1 second. Producer Patty, it is right before the Hulk fight or during the Hulk fight. Right in front of it, there should be some shots of it. She's talking to Devil Dinosaur Underground. Okay. Well, it's towards the front of the book. She's working on it. So
all right, cool. She literally, it was whatever the last one she had up, it's that one.
Yeah.
The lab gets destroyed, and I thought that she was going to have to come to terms with that, right? I'm assuming it's something that she spent a lot of time on, but we don't get a moment to really her to react to everything that she worked on being destroyed. We don't really know what in there was important to her. And then I was kind of hoping that she would have a moment to say, like, well, no, what's important is me, my intelligence. Like, she doesn't need the gadgets. She's just going to have to go ahead without the lab situation. Yeah, and then later on, it's just up and running, and they don't really explain that.
Yeah, and they don't explain how she excuses herself to go to the bathroom, crawl through an air conditioning vent to her secret, bat cave lab. I'm like, how long does the teacher think bathroom breaks take? What kind of stuff? I mean, how did you make it? We sometimes can just gloss over that. She has the cool thing. We don't care. Who cares? Don't ruin it. She has it. I'm fine with that. So I was fine with it existing. We'll just take it as written that somehow she found this space and has, over time, made it into a lab. But the thing I couldn't get over is she just was going to the bathroom. I'm like, she crawled through the ducts, found this place. She was going to conduct experiments, talk to the dinosaur. I'm like, did the teacher ever wonder where the heck she is?
Well, the dinosaur's down. I mean, I feel like she was spending a lot of extracurricular time there. That moment of it being destroyed.
Yeah.
Seemed like it was a big thing to her because she yelled about it to so many different people, and then for it to just magically be back up and running again was like
I think the plot point that the forwarding point that they wanted there was, once again, adults and the people around her have let her down. She's smarter than they are. If they just listened to her, everything would have been fine. And so it was again, the not two-dimensionality, pounding every square peg into round holes. It was going to fit that narrative, even though this was a moment to explore something else, which would have been good. We didn't quite get there. And then you're right. Immediately afterwards, the lab is fixed. And I'm going to point out, immediately after this, she saves all the kids in her class, she and Devil Dinosaur, by Devil Dinosaur makes a little slide. Everybody says, oh, T-Rex, what the heck? I guess it's better than fire. They jump on it and slide down. So she saves her class. And then there is no acknowledgement of that or gratitude from anybody in the entire rest of the book. It was just like she came to school the next day and they're still right back to, giving her a hard time and picking on her and little Miss Know-It-All, all that kind of thing.
And it's not even that like they need to show gratitude, but I think it would be good to show something. Yeah. Right? Like either that for her to acknowledge that there was indifference on their part, or for her to say, wow, it doesn't really pay, all of this stuff happened, her lab was destroyed. And it really didn't mean anything. Like, the kind of the series events happening without them putting that button on it to say, clearly, this is how this made her feel. This is how this has affected her moving forward. And I think it's important, especially in like for all media, but specifically for if you're trying to gear this towards kids, to sort of frame events around some kind of consequence, emotional consequence. So you're going into the like, this causes this, and that's just good writing.
I broke my notes down into likes and dislikes. Here is the first dislike. It becomes a story where things just happen. The individual bits don't support a greater theme, not well. So the idea that, just something happens and then the next issue, the next page even sometimes, we just forget about it. It might as well not have happened. And there's very little building towards something. The only story that they're really following is chasing the MacGuffin, this Kree Omniwave generator, and the Killer Folk, and the conflict in between Killer Folk, Devil Dinosaur, and Moon Girl all going after this one thing. That's it. That's the only one. All the other things that happen just don't really add to the story. They're interesting things that can happen. Sometimes they're fun action sequences, like with the Hulk, and then it's over. And she goes, and after he fights with the Hulk, they lock up Devil Dinosaur. She breaks into the Museum of Art, frees the dinosaur, because you keep dinosaurs in museums, and they trash the place on the way out. They have pictures of her on the news. They know exactly who did it. Nothing ever happened, and I don't know where she's hiding the dinosaur, but because her lab just got destroyed. But there's just the lack of a consequence for things that happen. That was the one key element that's missing. I do want to bring up again, because we spent a lot of time talking about this stuff, that kids have reacted to this book differently than I have. We've given it out and they wanted more. And I think just the high level concept is enough to pull them into this book, to read it, to enjoy it. They love the fact that there is a little girl with a giant red dinosaur riding it around, and they love the fact that she's super smart. So it does entertain children, and the bones of something just great are sitting there, and I wanted it to just be this much better and hit that level of greatness. Miss Marvel really hit it on all levels. You read Miss Marvel, a lot of these same themes were explored she was a little bit older, she was in high school, but the same thing of, I have these abilities that I'm better than the people around me, but I want to fit in, and I don't. For her, it's not so much that she's a super genius, but she's a Muslim living in a predominantly white community, and the desire to fit in is actually physically expressed in the comic book through her powers. For a while, when she first gets her powers, she turns into a white person. That's one of
wow.
She turns into Carol Danvers. She turns into Captain Marvel because that's her big hero, and in the swimsuit costume because she wants to be this tall, beautiful, blonde blue-eyed, hero that everybody looks up to, and the main story arc becomes, as she's learning her powers and everything, getting used to it, is that she doesn't need to be someone else to be heroic. She needs to be herself, and that's it. And so there we go. Actions and plot and things that happen, all building to that and helping further that story, that theme throughout the book. That's the little bit of connective tissue. We have all these bits sitting around. We just needed the needle and thread to
stitch it together,
make it all add up to something. And that's the little bit that I thought was missing. I'm really interested to see where the animation goes, because I think this is fairly tabula rasa. It's a blank slate. They're going to take that concept, and I think they're going to do what they want with it. Because again. They're going to tell a different version of this story, and all the pieces are there. So I'm curious if they managed to find that theme that I think eluded the writers in this one and stitch it together in a different way. Because I want to like this book much more than I liked it. So that was I so wanted to love this book.
Yeah, I think I feel the same way. I love there's a part of this book that I do love, and it's like you're saying, it's the bones, right? The bones of the book are amazing. I love looking at it.
Yeah.
I feel frustrated by the voice that's in my head as I read it, because it doesn't feel super authentic. There is part of this that does kind of feel like story by committee.
Yeah.
Right? Lunella always has the last word. Lunella never has to grow. Lunella is always in the right, which means that she never has anything to learn or change about. And that's kind of
it's just, it's foundational in the Marvel universe. To do better than this. Peter Parker, he gets powers and he's an ass. He goes out just to make money, and he ignores a bank, not a bank robber, a thief that he should have stopped because he just didn't want to help. And then that kills his Uncle Ben, which is a bit on the nose, but the first thing he learns a lesson by doing the wrong thing, and only then does he understand the lesson that was supposed to be taught to him, and that has influenced, basically 60 years of comics after that of 60. Yeah, God, I'm old. Spider-Man's old. But about 60 years of Spider-Man stories have all been influenced by, with great power comes great responsibility. Right. He learned that the hardest way possible, but everyone knows that story. Batman, it wasn't so much a lesson of him doing the wrong thing, but him seeing his parents murdered was this driving force. And so we understand why Batman does what he does. He doesn't want another little kid to go through what he went through, and that's why he's doing the things he did. That motivation, that, thing that ties it all together, just a little bit lacking here. So that it...
Definitely. I would say she's definitely cut from the modern mold of like a Tony Stark or a Doctor Strange of the MCU, where if you're very smart, then it's okay to treat the people around you unkindly.
Yeah.
And that is very frustrating to me, especially if I know that this is geared towards children, or that children can pick this up. Because I think a lot of times, like when there are kids who feel different, it is the norm to think that like, well, it's because everyone else around me is in the wrong. And this kind of confirms that a little bit, where it's like, yeah, of course, like your gym teacher is going to steal your OmniWave projector and accidentally open a portal to the past.
Because it's this glowing radioactive thing that's flying around and stuff, and he just starts, spinning it around like it's a top. And I'm just like, no. Just the adults are idiots in this book. Melissa brings up a good point, kind of furthering our idea. A lot of the individual interactions are great, but the bits aren't stuck together well. Series gets better as it goes forward, but they needed a stronger start. That has been my impression as well. I only read the first couple issues of this because I was spending way too much money at the comic shop. But I saw Lunella, and when she appeared in other books, she would show up as guest star in like Miss Marvel and other Ironheart, in other series. So I got to see the character there, and again, just conceptually, I loved it. So I just loved the idea of this hyper intelligent little black girl riding around on a dinosaur. And I wish that the first chunks of the her own story were as well supported as I wanted them to be.
Yeah, you're talking about driving forces. So these were some of the notes that I took, which was that, she identifies herself via her intelligence, but she criticizes other people who do the same thing, right? So that's something that can just be a learning moment, right? But it's never paid off. She has an unconditionally loving family who cares for her deeply, but her fear of change within herself seems to not reflect that. Like
Right.
if she had a family who only loved her for her intelligence or for something specific about the way she was in one certain state, then it would seem more like she would fear to change, to lose something about that, rather than knowing that they would love her regardless.
Yeah.
Or if she was hiding it from them or something.
We see that they are aware of her fear of becoming inhuman early on. So we see that. But they never try to console her. They never try to explain to her how things might be better or might be all right. We're left with them. They know it, and they never tell her anything. They don't try to give her the guidance that a parent would give in that situation. And that's a moment that I think should have been in there. So,
well, she's grounded, so
yeah,
it doesn't matter because she's grounded.
she's grounded. That's the big plot point we need.
And then her disinterest of being normal versus her fear of change.
Yeah.
And the fact that she doesn't see herself as a kid, which she says a couple times, like, who are you calling kid, right?
Right.
And then also her desire to grow up faster.
Yeah.
So she's sort of like, she's, going into a lot of different spaces. And then her curiosity as a scientist versus her complete disinterest in the devil dinosaur who came out of the artifact, which is the most important thing to her in her life.
Right.
So she keeps saying, like, she'll have an interaction with the dinosaur and she literally will turn her back and walk away.
Yeah, leaving a dinosaur in the middle of Manhattan or wherever they're at.
And it happened a couple times. And I was kind of like, if she was a scientist, like, it would be a good character moment for her to show interest in this dinosaur, especially because they're both after the same MacGuffin. It's like classic buddy comedy starter fuel, right? But since I also didn't really know why the devil dinosaur wanted.
Well, Moon Boy dies in the beginning. Spoiler. This character from 1973 dies in the first couple of minutes, but he dies in the first couple of minutes and tells Devil Dinosaur to make sure that the killer folk don't get it because, again, probably could use some explanation of what the heck they're going to do with it because I don't really see anything. They want to give a blood sacrifice. They keep saying that, so they're basically going to kill people for it. I don't know. I'll say this for Devil Dinosaur. He gets an idea in his head and he keeps it there because he's after that thing the entire time.
Right.
And I was actually curious about the killer folk. Yeah, sure, it was a great shiny thing back in 1 million BC or whenever they're from. But they come to modern day New York. There are shiny things everywhere. Wherever they still, it's like the gods must be crazy when they go all nuts over a Coke bottle. Well, now they're in the real world now. I thought that they would find other things, but they're still focused on that thing. Again, it's a MacGuffin. Could have used a little bit more explaining, a little de-MacGuffinizing, just to explain why everybody wants it so dang bad. But yeah, I think the bonding moment of her recognizing that Devil Dinosaur is lost and doesn't have a place to go, and is also an outsider. They're right there. That's something to explore. It's like her monologuing and talking to the dinosaur, saying, "I guess you're kind of like me because you don't know anybody either, and nobody understands what you're trying to do." And that could have happened because the cops had shot at him at this point and stuff. He could have said, "You were just trying to help," and I'm like that too. And we could have gotten some great motivation and character moments there. We're getting close to the end, so go ahead.
Can you show me the cover of your book?
BFF? What are we looking at?
I think you have... So there was one black writer on this comic, and I think it's listed on your copy and not on my copy.
Von Villain, I thought, did the colors. Let me see. That was something, that was actually right where I was going. I wanted to bring it up. The two primary writers, Tamara Bonvillain is the color artist. She's the colorist in the book. It's a black character living in a black family written by two white writers. And it's not like white people should never write black characters. But I think when you're doing this where you have a black character as the protagonist, I would prefer having a black writer behind there to keep a level of authenticity about what the black experience in America might be like. And, it's not like we're getting deep into, Black Lives Matter territory with Moon Girl and Devil Dinosaur. It's very surface stuff. But I'm guessing there are moments that just get missed of what the black experience would be like because the white people just haven't experienced it. It's not racism. If they haven't been there, they haven't done that, they haven't seen it. So I would have liked there to have been involvement from more black folk. Cartoon doesn't have that problem, so that we're...
I 100% agree, and for me, a lot of that came, in the moments of the interactions with her parents, and that was there was one part where her mother is speaking to her and she's rolling her eyes and going, la, la, la. And I was like, oh, no, that's not Black household talk right there. And then that's when I started like Googling, like, who put this to the paper?
Yeah.
I would have loved to have a little more authentic.
Well, to be fair to them, all the moments with adults were kind of inauthentic.
Sure.
But yes, it was, again, I just kept love the bones, and I kept saying, what would make this work? How could we tweak it to make all this happen? So, we came up with better motivation for the central character, and then the second thing that had to be fixed was better interactions with the adults around her, making them relatable people, flesh out the characters around her. And then that was number 3, is that if you're going to have a Black protagonist, you need, at least partially Black creative team. So there are Black people in the room saying, oh no, she would never do that, or that isn't how you do Black hair, whatever, something like that, or could add to it, could say, you should show a scene where she's getting her hair done in the morning, and this is what would happen. There are opportunities. Oh my God.
But on the plus side,
yes, this is why this book was the book's entire existence is justified by this this picture right here. That is a cosplayer at New York City Comic-Con. Dad dressed up like Double Dinosaur, and the little girl is dressed up like Lunella, complete with the moon shirt and the puffs on top of her head and the glasses. It is the most frickin' adorable thing I've ever seen in my life. I thought this was so good. And, and that's when you start thinking, I don't have much of a representation problem. I see myself on the page all the time. I say, I could be that guy, I could be that guy, I could be that guy. I went, this little girl, there may have been, and again, we go back to Storm. After that, she doesn't have people that she can identify with very often on the screen. And the fact that this character exists for her now, I love. And I love the fact that it's being turned into a cartoon. And we're going to get kind of another bite at the apple to go over and give her some of that depth of character that I thought was a little bit lacking in this take on it. I want it to do well. I root for this book so damn hard. I love this. I love the character. I love everything about it. And I just, again, I was a little... I thought there were missed opportunities in the book that I'm hoping they connect in this cartoon that's coming up. I'm going to be watching it. There's no doubt in my mind. I am there, first day that it's out and streaming that bad boy. We should talk about what we're doing next month. Here we go. Through the Woods by Emily Carroll. It is October, so we're doing a spooky book. This is an anthology one I haven't read, but is well reviewed. For grown-ups, and it's got a lot of scary stories about ghosts and vampires and things like that. The art is just beautiful. There's a lot of dual-chromatic pages like black and red, which we've seen actually not too long ago with Dracula. We'll just leave it at Dracula. And so that's our book for next month. It's one I haven't read, which is a rarity, and I love getting books that I haven't read, because that gives, so often I come into it with all my thoughts already fully formed, and I'm just ready to go. And so this is going to be a new one for us. We're Through the Woods. We looked at it, decided it looked good, and I hope we're right. It seems to be well liked on Amazon. So everybody go out and get yourself a copy of Through the Woods. It looks pretty. You're going to be helping a small independent artist writer, and we appreciate it. All right. So I guess the time has come to say goodbye. Tune in to Moon Girl and Double Dinosaur in February. Wave hi to Lawrence Fishburne if you pass him on the street, and we will see you in a month.